Hey everybody, this is Paul, and today we're going to talk about cold hardiness. So we had a viewer, Gary Bishop, make a comment requesting us talk about this more. So here you go, Gary. We got this information from the UCCE at the Pattaya Festival this year, and these are 20 dragon fruit varieties that have been evaluated. So don't forget, cold hardiness is important, but don't forget heat tolerance and sweetness of the varieties, and weight of the fruit, and how long it takes for that fruit to harvest. So out of all this data here, what I think is first is Valdivia Roja is going to be the toughest, followed by El Grullo, and third and fourth are actually Guatemalensis here, Physical Graffiti, Halley's Comet, and fifth I'd put Lisa or Sabra, or Hona. They're all these highlighted ones will do fine, Armando as well. And let's see, next I'm going to show you out in our field El Grullo and these Guatemalensis varieties here and Armando, so you could kind of see why they are more tolerant or tough to Southern California climate. You can see that this El Grullo is really cold hardy. First off the bat, you can see the thickness right here of its ribs. So definitely a nice thick and hardy variety of dragon fruit, you can see. And it just doesn't get much damage at all from the cold weather. You can see some other indicators of kind of the shape up here, how thick and robust that is. Okay, also some red varieties will be pretty hardy too, like this one. Now Armando is also another thick and hardy, heat and cold tolerant dragon fruit variety. You can see why. It's just almost more like a cactus, so it's pretty thick and nice wide stem, as you can see. Now here's Soul Kitchen White, which is a white variety, but this scored pretty well, and you can see there's not much damage either on that thing. So these are very different looking in their own way. You can see this one's been growing like crazy all winter, Soul Kitchen White. So definitely this one is a more hardy variety. Now let me show you what happens when they're not hardy, and I'll show you some damage. Alright, here's some cold damage on dragon fruit, as you can see. A little bit of yellowing. This is an unknown variety. And then look it down here. This is the sad, what happens to dragon fruit that can get rot. And so you can see it's all squishy in there. It's really gross. Look at this piece. I'm gonna have to cut this here. But I wanted to kind of let it be so you could see what happens, just how squishy it turns into mush. You can see if I broke this, it would just leak everywhere. So that is the bummer about the frost and cold weather. And again, this is a less cold hardy dragon fruit, and this is what you can see. It kind of turns to mush, usually from the tips back. So you can see it's up here too. So I'll cut it out. Eventually I'm going to cut this off today, right here, and wear gloves and try not to get any of that stuff on you. It's nasty. So tonight is the first night this season, this winter, below 40 degrees predicted. It's 46 degrees right now. And these two I'm going to leave. This Harissa on the left is pretty tough, and San Ignacio is a small cutting, but that thing's tough and old, so it should do fine. If you don't do anything, this is what happens when you get cold weather. This is a Pride of Fallbrook I bought, and it had some frost damage last year. So you can see it right there. The frost kind of stopped this new piece from growing, so it's not very tall. And there's another one down here. So you can see that it started growing, and then the frost stunted it because this has some winter growth. Something trellis like this tonight, like this new growth here, I may lose it, but we'll see. This is Delight. I'm interested to see if it could survive. But I don't want to cover everything. I can't. I don't have the time, nor the tarps. And so what I can do are any new cuttings here, you could see certain ones I could probably leave out, like this Neon is thick. It's olive kind of sugar dragon style. Thick skin, similar to, I believe this is Mr. Woo. Yep. Both of those have that olive green kind of thick. These would probably maybe get a little damage, but they'll probably be fine. But something thinner like this Connie Mare would definitely probably suffer some damage, especially anything yellow skinned. I'll talk about those in a second. So I'm going to definitely put all of these in my garage tonight.
But if I didn't have the room, I'd certain varieties, something like this or a white flesh. Most white flesh varieties are more sensitive to frost, need to go inside. Also yellow skin varieties too. This K55 I would do fine tonight in the low 40s is what's, no sorry, it's going to be about 36 degrees tonight is our low, 36 to 37. So this thing would survive, but again I'll put it inside. But I wouldn't worry about a cutting like that or something like this large neon. Now the red ES1 is a bit more sensitive, it feels like. It's a younger, kind of thinner piece, so I definitely am going to put that inside along with Pink Panther because this is a new growth. And then this Columbiana would definitely not do well in the frost or anything in the 30s. So anything 40 below, something like this Columbiana needs to go and be protected until it gets more mature. In addition, you really, something like this this purple haze here, whoops, has this new shoot here, new growth, see it? So that will abort if it is in the high 30s tonight. So I don't want to lose that on this new cutting. It's doing well. Also anything that's kind of weakened, this is a Laverne Red I got, and it wasn't doing too well, trying to bring it back to life, and we don't want it to suffer from any cold weather. This is a young axe cutting, definitely needs to go inside because it's young, it's thin, and it's a bit more sensitive. It doesn't have that thicker kind of sugar dragon or neon olive skin. Lastly here, I could show you that these two are unknown red varieties. They're going to really thick. They're going to do fine in cold weather. But since I can't bring in this giant yellow Pelora seedling, it's a Megalanthus, yellow skin. It's really long, but it has some new growth here finally. Very excited to finally see that, and it's in the middle of December. So I want to protect it. I'm going to do what I've shown you already on our channel, is where I cover it with a tarp and basically put a bunch of Christmas lights. Ooh, I got stuck. Christmas lights wrapped around under here. And so I'm just going to cover this with a large tarp and then put Christmas lights to protect that Frankie's Red, this large Bruni, and then a graft I have. So I think you need about an 8-foot tarp or so is what I'd recommend. At least a 6x8 is what I'm using. And again, Christmas lights, not the style that are LED. You're going to want to try to get the older style if you can, because they emit a bit more heat. So anyways, I hope this helps, but that's what I'm going to do because we're going to get about to a low of 36, I think. So this is a tarp and some Christmas lamp lights. Not LED, but they don't get very hot. They're glass, the mini ones. And what I like to do is I do this on our rare palm trees as well. And I put a tarp over the plant and put Christmas lights under the tarp. So let's see here. You can see I have just a nice big piece of bamboo, and I'm protecting this yellow Pelora seedling, Megalanthus. They are especially sensitive to cold weather. So if we get to like 35, or it's predicted, I'm going to do this to protect this plant and Frankie's Red as well. So all you need are a few strings of Christmas lights. That, again, they don't get too hot, but they produce a bit of warmth. It feels nice and warm under here. And I try not to let the tarp touch the dragon fruit plant, so that way it won't get its tip burnt. So this will definitely work if it gets probably down to the upper 20s, I would say, which is very, very rare in our climate. So we only get to maybe 30, low 30s once, twice a year for that. So I'm going to try this strategy out, and I expect it to keep our plants safe. This is Paul, and I've already talked about this chart, but I really want to focus on cold hardiness today in plants that are on here that score under 3. They will get frost damage even in a mild winter, in my opinion. This winter has been pretty mild. We've been in the high 40s and a few nights into the upper 30s, and definitely American Beauty's gotten a lot of damage and some other things as well. So let's go talk about first what's weakest here is number 1, and that's going to be a yellow variety of dragon fruit. So here's like our Columbiana here, and it's been in the garage this whole season. It's just slowly shriveling up because it's just not
growing any roots. If it's not warm enough, this thing doesn't grow at all. Here's a Yellow Cross 68, no new growth here, and I keep that in the garage as well. That's a half yellow dragon fruit and half, I believe, Guatemalensis variety. Here's Frankie's Red. That thing does not like the cold, so you can see we've been using Christmas lights to keep them warm, and our giant yellow Pelora. So all of these despise the cold, and that's why I have these Christmas lights on. It was at 41 degrees last night, so I light these up and then cover it with a tarp. You can see this thing is doing pretty well, but it's just stopped growing completely. So these are definitely, if you don't protect them and keep them inside, they'll definitely get damaged, or something like this Frankie's Red would probably die if I didn't keep covering it up at night, even though it's only in the low 40s. Alright, let me go show you some more heavily damaged varieties. Okay, so according to Thai Spicy Exotics, it's been found that American Beauty is the same as Bien Hoa Red. So, however, they were scored differently. So Bien Hoa Red was marked at like 1.75 according to that data sheet, and American Beauty was at 2.75. And I think that's definitely wrong. That's what's happened here from the frost. It was doing really well until this piece is about a foot long, and the frost just damaged it right there all the way to the stem. So I'll probably have to cut it here and see if I can save the rest of this piece, as you can see. So bummer about that, but I'm gonna leave it. It might stay. We'll see. The stem might bounce back, but that was one piece of evidence to show it easily gets damaged by frost. There's some down there by the stem as well. See that rot? And some right here too. So that is all frost damage right there. This is gonna come back. I could probably cut it off, but I'm just gonna wait a bit until it warms up, or if it continues to spread. It hasn't really spread much at all. However, this is another American Beauty, and you can see that's just got damaged. It's all rotted right at the stem. So I think this whole piece is gonna not survive, but the piece above it may. So I would definitely say American Beauty is really the most sensitive to cold out of all of our varieties so far. Alright, now compare that to Cinnaspinas here, right next to it, the same microclimate, and it's doing much better. The only frost damage it had was right here, and that's on a really small new growth. You can see I probably should have pruned it back, and that thing was growing all winter. So it'll probably fall off like right about here and continue to grow. Other than that, there's no damage at all on Cinnaspinas. A bit of rust, as you can see right there, those spots there. That's rust. You could treat it with copper fungicide or do nothing. Most people don't. A lot of growers leave it alone. But Cinnaspinas is definitely much more cold hardy, in my opinion, and this cutting's only about 8 months old. So definitely, if you compare American Beauty to Cinnaspinas, you can see clearly a difference in the tolerance of a light, cold frost. Alright, let's see what else we can find. Also, not on the paper for evaluation is Condor. And Condor, you can see here, definitely this younger new growth was frost damaged by the frost. And this one that's grew kind of all summer did a lot better. So once it kind of has a chance to thicken up, Condor is definitely more frost hardy than the other varieties I've shown you by far. I'd probably rank it, if I had to guess, like maybe a low 3 for Condor. Also, there's Red Hiana. Let me go show you that damage as well. Okay, so with Red Hiana, I actually cut out the first bit of frost damage, and it was really, really thick. And so now it's kind of growing back. It's got some more here. See, it's a different type of structure of this plant. So the rot is definitely just blacker, but it's definitely squishy. So I'm gonna leave that right there because I cut it out, and you can see it's still kind of growing. It's just been really, really cold. And so this one does not tolerate the frost either. And this is red Hiana, or some people said red Jaina. So that one definitely does not like frost. But then you compare it to a different Paul Thompson, like seedling, like Dark Star. Look at this thing. I think it's a Paul Thompson, I can't remember offhand. But either way, there's zero frost damage at all. I mean, it's still growing. If you look carefully, it's got some winter growth here, right there. See it? So I tipped this about a month ago in the middle of the winter just to see what would happen. We have some new growth there. And zero frost damage. It seems really, really happy. So there's a couple others that are grown in the winter. Let's go show you them really quickly and talk about their cold hardiness. Okay, I also should note that Pride of Fallbrook has some frost damage right there. It's the only spot on the plant, which I thought was pretty interesting. So I'll probably just cut that off and it should be fine. Now, I find it interesting that Halley's Comet has all this crazy winter growth here. It definitely does really well during light frost. So Halley's Comet just keeps growing and growing even during the cold weather. And I would say it's an excellent plant for using as rootstock for grafting as well. So Halley's Comet definitely scores higher, so does Delight. You can see here, Delight. It's a lot of new growth as well. But it did stop right there on the tip, see it? That's what happened right at the last frost. So there's 20, the chart that I showed you, let me grab it again. It definitely is helpful, you know? But there's so many other varieties, and they're also unique, or many of them are unique. So cold hardiness is definitely something I'm checking, but I'm keeping most of my new young cuttings in the garage just to be safe. But you can clearly see there's a lot of variation for cold hardiness and frost tolerance in dragon fruit. Hey, what's up everybody? Let's talk about some ways we can protect our dragon fruit cuttings and plants from frost or cold weather. Now you can see I live in Southern California, and in our unheated greenhouse I have many rooted cuttings and grafts over here that are doing great. Now some still have growth, some kind of act more dormant, like succulents I guess you could say, and don't really do much other than root. But it really depends on heat and the temperature in here. So we've had some lows of 39 degrees recently, and everything does fine in here. Last year we had a low of 29 for a short duration, and everything did well in here also. So you can see I kind of fill it to the gills with tropicals and things like that. And you can see over here, this is where I keep my more sensitive, unrooted cuttings, Selenocereus hybrids, seedlings, and some new grafts. And notice that I keep the soil much more dry over here. So the key is, if you're gonna have cuttings and try to root them in Southern California's winter, is keep them indoors. When it gets cold, I'd say below 40 degrees. And you could use a garage, your house, a shed. Just keep them safe from the colder temperature, especially if it's a cold, dry, wet wind. So if you overwater them, you will likely rot the cuttings or get rust. So definitely treat them differently during this cold months in Southern California. And if you want to know, I water the seedlings pretty much as normal, and everything else I usually water the flesh once a week, maybe twice a week, depending on how warm it gets here in the daytime. So again, that is part of my strategy. Let's go outside now and talk about some bigger plants that I cannot move. So as you can see, I can't move these mature plants, and I'm probably not going to be able to protect them from cold weather, and that's okay. Mature rooted plants, they tend to do fine down to 33 degrees. Now there is differences in varieties, like Paul Thompson seedlings and things like that. I would say do fine till about 33 degrees in Southern California.
when they start to get a bit of damage. But Solanacereus, like Yellow-Skin Pelora or a Megalanthus or Solanacereus varieties, they start to get a bit of damage at about 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So you may want to give them some protection. I'll show you how to do that coming up. But what you want to do also is water them much less. I've turned off the irrigation. I let the rain water these plants, and they do fine. And if there is going to be some really cold weather, like say a cold Santa Ana, what I do is I water the soil really well before that cold snap. That will help by a few more degrees for your plants. And I know it sounds kind of strange, but that's what Paul Thompson recommends in his book. And let me go show you some more things that he recommends in his book about cold weather and dragon fruit. So as you can see, I like to place some of my favorite varieties in a spot in the yard where they're going to get the first sunlight in the morning and some protection in the afternoon. So that also helps with things like this Assunta 4 here in cold weather, because it's going to warm up really quickly, so it shouldn't get damaged from a cold snap. Now here's what I learned from Paul Thompson's book Pitaya on this topic. And you can see he writes how Hass avocados are a good guide for growing dragon fruit. And he describes that cold, dry wind versus the cold, wet wind. In addition, he describes the frost damage as really similar to sunburn, but the core will get destroyed and that rot will set in and the plant will have to be cut out. Now, different varieties do need different protection. You can see I have a Hass avocado here, and it's protecting our Maui Dragon variety. Now, this plant got damaged from too much sun last year, so I wasted a whole season, had to cut out the rot, and then now it's getting this protection from the afternoon sunlight in the summer. It's also getting that nice warm sunlight in the mornings and some protection from the wind as well. So I have it right next to a Hass avocado, and it seems to be doing much better this season. So let's go talk about some things I do to protect my yellow Pelora and my yellow skin varieties. So here is my giant yellow Pelora. It's a Solanacereus Megalanthus variety of dragon fruit, and it's doing great. Now hopefully you saw our video last season where this plant, I covered it a few times with a tarp and incandescent Christmas lights that I lit up, and I did that whenever the weather got below 39 degrees Fahrenheit. I had to do it about 4 or 5 times last year, and this plant had 0 damage, which is awesome. So that's gonna be my strategy again this season. I'm gonna do the same thing. But as you can see here, this lovely variety I grow in the soil. It's not grafted, and it is a bit of a slow grower in the past year or so that I've had it. So hopefully next season it's gonna pick up its growth, but you can see it's growing right now, and it has 0 damage so far. So if it gets below 39 degrees, I'm gonna cover it with that tarp and use those Christmas lights. All right, let's go show you some damage from last season's frost. So here it is. This is what happens to some Nicaraguan varieties especially. This is Cebra, or Cebra some people call it. But Lisa, Cebra, they're very similar, and this is what happens to their stem. Especially even if they're happy plants, it just kind of, they split open and expose the core. And in the past with Lisa, I cut it up and had to reroot them all, but I left the Cebra. And I'm glad I did, because I've seen some really mature Lisa plants and they do fine. They recover from this. They kind of weep and eventually heal. The wound will heal in time. So that is something that you can be concerned with. Some people fill it with even like roofing tar, but I've seen some old school growers and some old mature plants like this, and they were fine. They did well, they produced well, so I'm just gonna leave this alone and only be concerned if there is a lack of new growth or the plant thins out. It should, in other words, it should stay plump. So that can happen from cold weather in Southern California. All right, let me go show you one more mature plant and how quick they can recover from damage. So here's Dark Star, and you can see it's had a wonderful season of growth. It's gonna produce some fruit next year, but it actually had some severe damage
this past winter here on one of my grafts that I left out in the cold. So you can see here's the graft, and it exposed the core, and I was going to remove it, but I decided to leave it alone, and it's bounced back luckily, and it grew a very, very long two-sided branch that continued to grow all season. Topped the trellis, believe it or not. Went straight up and folded over. So it's right here. And then became three-sided. So super cool. Look at how large this one branch is from that little graft, despite having the core exposed. So really amazing resiliency of these plants, and just because the core is exposed doesn't mean that it's going to be ruined. You just need to track the growth and make sure that the new growth is vigorous, and hopefully in time this will callus over more, but it's doing great, so I'm just going to let it be. So there you go. I hope this helps with some strategies and some of my experiences growing dragon fruit in Southern California, Zone 9B, and dealing with some cold weather. So give us a like and a subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful day, and thanks for watching. Take care.